The poor maid's baby crawled into the billionaire's study, and now he'll never let the little one go. The marble floors of the Ashford mansion gleamed like mirrors under the morning sun, reflecting the careful work of Elena Martinez's worn hands. At 28, she'd grown accustomed to making herself invisible in this world of impossible wealth, a shadow that dusted, polished, and disappeared before the master of the house noticed her presence. Elena had been working at the estate for 6 months now, ever since her world had crumbled. Her husband's death in a construction accident had left her drowning in medical debt, alone with 3-year-old Sophia and nowhere to turn. This job, with its modest wage and the small servants' quarters in the East Wing, had been a lifeline she'd grabbed with both hands. "Stay close to Mama," she whispered to Sophia each morning, though the little girl understood very little English yet. They spoke Spanish at home, in their tiny room that was still larger than the apartment they'd shared in the city. "Don't wander. Especially not to the 3rd floor." The 3rd floor belonged to Alexander Ashford, the 33-year-old billionaire who owned this palace and a dozen others around the world. Elena had seen him exactly twice, once on her first day, when his cold gray eyes had swept over her with the interest one might give a piece of furniture, and once in passing, when she'd pressed herself against the wall to let him stride by, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice sharp as he discussed millions of dollars like pocket change. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Chun, had been explicit in her warnings. Mr. Ashford values his privacy above all else. The 3rd floor, especially his study, is absolutely off-limits. He works from home most days, and he is not to be disturbed. Ever. Girls have been fired for less. Elena had no intention of risking her job. Every penny she earned went toward paying down the debt collectors who still called daily, their voices as sharp as knives. She couldn't afford to lose this position. But 3-year-olds don't understand forbidden doors. It happened on a Tuesday morning in late September. Elena had been cleaning the 2nd-floor library, Sophia playing quietly with her worn cloth doll on the Persian rug nearby. Elena had turned her back for just a moment, just one moment, to reach a high shelf. When she looked down, Sophia was gone. Her heart stopped. "Sophia? Mija, ¿dónde estás?" The library door stood ajar. Beyond it, the hallway stretched empty. And at the far end, the servant staircase to the 3rd floor gaped open, a door that should have been locked. Elena ran, her heart hammering against her ribs. She took the stairs 2 at a time, her breath coming in panicked gasps. The 3rd floor hallway was carpeted in deep burgundy, lined with doors of dark mahogany. All closed except one. The study. Through the open doorway, Elena could see floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the estate's sprawling gardens. Built-in bookshelves groaned under the weight of leather-bound volumes. A massive desk dominated the space, its surface covered in multiple computer monitors, documents, and Sophia, her small body crawling determinately across the expensive Persian rug toward a silver letter opener that glinted on a low shelf. "Sophia, no." Elena burst into the room, forgetting everything but her daughter's safety. She scooped the little girl up just as small fingers were about to grasp the sharp object. I'm so sorry, Elena gasped, backing toward the door, holding Sophia tight. "She got away from me. She didn't mean—" "Stop." The voice came from behind her, deep and commanding. Elena froze, her blood turning to ice. She turned slowly, clutching Sophia against her chest. Alexander Ashford stood in the doorway, filling it with his presence. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with dark hair that looked like he'd been running his hands through it in frustration. His gray eyes she remembered as cold, were fixed not on her, but on Sophia. The little girl, rather than being frightened, looked at him with open curiosity. Her brown eyes, so like her father's, studied this tall stranger without fear. "Mr. Ashford, I'm so deeply sorry," Elena stammered, her accent thickening with fear. She didn't understand. I'll go, right now, I'll pack our things. How old is she? His voice cut through her panic. Elena blinked, confused.
3, sir.
She just turned 3 last month. Something shifted in Alexander's expression, so subtle Elena might have imagined it. His jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. What's her name? Sophia. Sir, please, I know I broke the rules. She doesn't speak English. It wasn't a question. She's learning. We speak Spanish at home, but she's starting to understand. Hi. Sophia's small voice interrupted her mother, clear and bright. The little girl waved at Alexander, her chubby hand opening and closing. Hi, mister. For a moment, Alexander Ashford, the man who commanded boardrooms and made grown executives tremble, seemed at a loss for words. He stared at the small hand waving at him as if he'd never seen such a gesture before. Hello, he finally said, his voice oddly strained. Sophia beamed, clearly proud of her English. Then she held up her cloth doll, its face faded from hundreds of nights of cuddling. Rosita, she announced. She's my baby. I see. Alexander's voice had dropped to something softer, something Elena had never heard in the brief encounters they'd had. That's a very nice baby. Elena felt like she'd stepped into an alternate reality. This was the man who'd fired his last driver for being 3 minutes late, who'd had a contractor blacklisted for using the wrong shade of white paint. And he was having a conversation with her toddler? Mr. Ashford. She tried again, her voice shaking. I'll take her downstairs right now. It won't happen again. The door was supposed to be locked, but that's no excuse. The letter opener. He gestured to the shelf Sophia had been crawling toward. She could have hurt herself. I know. I'm so. Why was she unsupervised? The question hit like a slap. Elena felt tears prick her eyes, shame burning her cheeks. I had to work. I thought she was playing safely, but she's fast, and I turned my back for just a second. Where does she stay while you work? Elena swallowed hard. In our room, usually. But she gets lonely, and she's so quiet most of the time, I thought if I kept her near me. She trailed off, knowing how pathetic it sounded. What kind of mother brought her child to work in a billionaire's mansion? But what choice did she have? Daycare cost more than she made. Her family was back in Mexico. She had no one. Alexander was quiet for a long moment, his eyes still on Sophia, who had started babbling to her doll in Spanish, telling Rosita about the big house and the tall man. Mrs. Chun mentioned you were widowed, he said finally. Elena nodded, not trusting her voice. The father?
He died.
8 months ago. Construction accident. The words still felt like glass in her throat. Alexander's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those gray eyes. Pain? Recognition? It was gone before Elena could identify it. Go back to work, he said abruptly. But the child needs proper supervision. I'll arrange something. Elena's eyes widened. Sir, you don't have to. I'll arrange something, he repeated, his tone brooking no argument. Then, more quietly, almost to himself, a 3-year-old shouldn't be crawling around unsupervised. She could get hurt. He turned to leave, then paused in the doorway. Elena, isn't it? She was shocked he knew her name. Yes, sir. The 3rd floor is still off limits. But he glanced back at Sophia, who was watching him with those big, curious eyes. Accidents happen. Make sure it doesn't become a habit. He was gone before Elena could respond, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. Elena stood in the study, holding Sophia, her heart still racing. She'd just broken the cardinal rule of the Ashford household, and instead of being fired on the spot, Alexander Ashford had. What? Shown mercy? Understanding? Mama, Sophia whispered, patting her cheek. Why crying? Elena hadn't realized tears were streaming down her face. She kissed her daughter's forehead, holding her close. Happy tears, Mija. Mama's just tired. As she carried Sophia downstairs, Elena couldn't shake the image of Alexander's face when he'd looked at her daughter. For just a moment, the ice in those gray eyes had melted, replaced by something that looked almost like longing. She didn't know that upstairs, Alexander Ashford stood at his study window, his hands clenched into fists, fighting against memories he'd spent 5 years trying to bury. A little girl's laugh. A nursery painted yellow. A future that had died in one terrible night. He hadn't been near a child since. Hadn't been able to bear it. But something about that little girl with the bright eyes and the worn cloth doll had cracked something open inside him. Something he'd thought was sealed forever. And Alexander Ashford, who controlled everything in his world, suddenly felt terribly, dangerously out of control. The next morning, Elena arrived at work with Sophia to find Mrs. Chen waiting in the servants' hall, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Ashford wants to see you," the head housekeeper said. "In the morning room." Immediately, Elena's stomach dropped. This was it. He'd reconsidered. She was being fired after all. She'd spent all night rehearsing what she'd say, how she'd beg for one more chance, but now that the moment had arrived, her mind went blank. "I'll watch the little one," Mrs. Chen said, her stern face softening slightly as Sophia peeked out from behind Elena's legs. "Go on." The morning room was on the first floor, a space Elena had cleaned 100 times, but never actually occupied. It was decorated in soft creams and golds, with French doors opening onto a terrace. Alexander stood by those doors, his back to her, hands in his pockets, looking out at the manicured gardens. He was dressed more casually than she'd ever seen him, dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that probably cost more than her monthly salary. Somehow, it made him seem more intimidating, not less. More real. "Sit," he said without turning around. Elena perched on the edge of an antique chair that was probably worth more than everything she owned, her hands twisted together in her lap. "I've made arrangements," Alexander said, finally turning to face her. In the morning light, she noticed details she'd missed before, the shadows under his eyes suggesting he didn't sleep well, the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, the way he held himself with rigid control, as if relaxation was a luxury he couldn't afford. "There's a room in the West Wing, near the staff quarters. It was originally designed as a playroom for—" He stopped abruptly, his jaw tightening. "It's been unused. I've had it converted into a childcare space." Elena stared at him, certain she'd misheard. "I don't understand. Your daughter needs supervision while you work. I've hired a qualified nanny. She starts Monday." He spoke briskly, as if discussing a business transaction. "The nanny will care for Sophia from 8 to 5, 5 days a week. The cost will be deducted from your salary over time, interest-free." "Mr. Ashford, I can't possibly. That must cost. I could never afford." "The deduction will be minimal. $20 per week." He held up a hand before she could protest. "It's non-negotiable. I won't have a child wandering the halls unsupervised. It's a liability." "A liability." Of course. This wasn't kindness, it was risk management. Elena felt foolish for the flutter of hope that had sparked in her chest. "Thank you," she managed. "That's very generous. It's practical." His tone was cold, dismissive. But then he added, more quietly, "No child should be left alone." There was something in those words, some weight that suggested he wasn't just talking about Sophia. Elena wanted to ask, but the walls he'd erected were clear. She recognized them because she'd built similar ones around her own grief. "There's one more thing," Alexander said, moving to the desk and picking up a folder. "I had my attorney draw up papers. A legal guardianship arrangement." Elena's blood ran cold. "What? If something happens to you, Sophia needs protection." He spoke matter-of-factly, but he wouldn't meet her eyes. "You're a single mother with no family in the country. If you became incapacitated or worse, she'd go into the foster system. This way, there's a designated guardian." "You?" Elena's voice came out as a whisper. "It's purely precautionary. A legal safeguard. He finally looked at her, and Elena saw something flicker in those gray eyes, something desperate and controlled all at once. You're free to decline, but I strongly suggest you consider it. Elena's mind reeled. This man, who barely knew her, who'd spoken to her daughter once, wanted to be named as Sophia's guardian? It was insane, inappropriate, possibly dangerous. Why? The question burst out before she could stop it. Why would you do this for us? You don't know us. Sophia is nothing to you. Alexander's face went very still. For a long moment he didn't speak. When he did, his voice was rough, scraped raw. I had a daughter once. The words hung in the air between them, heavy as stones. She would have been 8 now. He turned back to the window, his shoulders rigid. She died when she was 3. Along with my wife. Car accident. Drunk driver ran a red light. Elena's hand flew to her mouth. Mr. Ashford, I don't want sympathy. The words were sharp, cutting. I'm telling you so you understand. I know what it's like to lose everything. And I know that children need protection. They need safety nets. Your daughter deserves that. I don't know what to say. Say you'll consider it. The papers don't need to be signed immediately. Think about it. He pulled another document from the folder. In the meantime, I'm increasing your salary. You're clearly overqualified for housekeeping. My assistant mentioned we need someone to help organize the estate's charitable foundation files. It's tedious work, but it pays better, and the hours are more regular. You'd work from the estate office. Elena felt like she was drowning. This is too much. I can't accept. You can and you will. Alexander's voice turned hard, commanding. The billionaire used to getting his way. Your daughter needs stability. You need security. I'm offering both. The only question is whether you're too proud to accept help when it's offered. The accusation stung because it was partially true. Elena had always prided herself on making her own way, not accepting charity. But was pride worth more than Sophia's future? Than the chance to give her daughter the security she deserved? Why are you really doing this? She asked quietly.
Please.
I need to understand. Alexander was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Because yesterday, when your daughter smiled at me, I felt something I hadn't felt in 5 years. Something I thought was dead. He turned to face her, and Elena saw raw pain in his eyes. I felt human again. For just a moment, the weight lifted. And he stopped, seeming to struggle for words. I can't explain it, but I won't let another child go unprotected if I have the means to help. I couldn't save my own daughter. Maybe I can help yours. Tears streamed down Elena's face. She saw him now, not the cold billionaire, but a father destroyed by loss, looking for some way to make meaning from tragedy. Okay, she whispered. Okay, I'll accept the job. And I'll think about the guardianship. Something like relief washed over Alexander's features. He nodded curtly back to business. Good. HR will have the paperwork ready this afternoon. The nanny, Miss Sarah, will meet with you this weekend to discuss Sophia's routine and needs. Is there anything else you require? Elena thought of her daughter, of the opportunity being offered, of the impossible kindness wrapped in this broken man's businesslike exterior. Just thank you for seeing us, for caring. I'm not a charity case, Alexander said stiffly. This arrangement benefits me as well. I'm funding a new children's hospital wing, and I need someone who understands what struggling families face. Your perspective will be valuable. Another excuse, another wall. But Elena understood now. This man didn't know how to accept gratitude, didn't know how to acknowledge his own goodness. Grief had taught him to hide behind transactions and practicality. Still, she said softly, thank you. As she left the morning room, Elena glanced back to see Alexander standing at the window again, his silhouette dark against the bright morning. He looked profoundly alone. She didn't know that after she left, Alexander sank into the nearest chair, his hands shaking. He hadn't spoken about Lily and Caroline to anyone in 5 years. The grief counselor he'd seen twice before firing her. The friends who'd tried to reach him before he'd cut them all off. No one. But something about Elena's quiet strength, about Sophia's innocent smile, had broken through the walls he'd built so carefully. It terrified him, but it also felt like taking a breath after drowning. That afternoon, Sophia met Miss Sarah, a warm woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a gentle manner. The playroom, because Alexander had been right, it had been designed as a playroom. Elena could see it in the built-in toy shelves and the windows positioned low for small eyes, was filled with age-appropriate toys, books in both English and Spanish, and a small table perfect for a 3-year-old. Oh, Mija, Elena breathed, watching Sophia's eyes go wide with wonder. Look at all this. Mr. Ashford was very specific about his requirements, Miss Sarah said, smiling. He wanted to ensure Sophia felt safe and stimulated. He even asked about dietary requirements and any allergies. Elena's throat tightened. He'd thought of everything. Over the next few days, a routine established itself. Elena worked in the state office, organizing files and learning about the Ashford Foundation's various charitable initiatives. Sophia spent her days with Miss Sarah, learning English through play, making art projects, and being, for the first time in months, just a carefree child. And Alexander. Alexander started appearing more often. At first, it was subtle. Elena would find him in the hallway outside the playroom, ostensibly reading something on his phone, but his eyes would drift to the door where Sophia's laughter echoed. Once, she caught him standing in the doorway, watching Sophia build a tower of blocks, his expression unguarded and achingly sad. She's doing well, Elena said softly, not wanting to startle him. Alexander straightened immediately, his mask sliding back into place. Good. That's good. He cleared his throat. Miss Sarah mentioned she enjoys the art supplies. She loves to paint. Makes a mess, but she loves it. Lily loved painting too. The words escaped before he could stop them. He looked shocked at himself, then added quickly, Your daughter reminds me of her. The curiosity, the fearlessness. I'm glad, Elena said gently. I'm glad something here reminds you of her. I'm glad you can talk about her. I don't talk about her. But even as he said it, he continued. She had blonde curls. Always getting into them. Caroline used to say she was like a little tornado, destroying everything in her path with love. Elena smiled, even as her heart broke for him. Sophia's the same way. Hurricane Sophia, her father used to call her. They stood together in companionable silence, watching through the doorway as Sophia carefully painted what might have been a flower or possibly a dog. It was hard to tell. I've been thinking about the guardianship papers, Elena said quietly. Alexander went very still. And I'll sign them. You're right. Sophia needs protection. And I think. She paused, choosing her words carefully. I think maybe you need her too. Not to replace Lily. Nothing could ever do that. But maybe to remember that love doesn't end with loss. That there's still good in the world worth protecting. Alexander's jaw worked, emotion flickering across his face, too fast to name. Finally, he just nodded. Thank you, he said roughly, for trusting me with something so precious. Before Elena could respond, Sophia noticed them in the doorway. Her face lit up with a smile that could rival the sun. Mr. Alex, she called, waving her paint-covered hand. She'd started calling him that after Miss Sarah had introduced them properly. Look, I paint. I see that, Alexander called back, and Elena heard the smile in his voice even though his expression remained controlled. It's very beautiful. You want to paint with Sophia? It was the first time she'd directly invited him into her world. Alexander looked at Elena, something like panic in his eyes. Go ahead, Elena encouraged softly. If you want to. For a moment, she thought he'd retreat, pull back behind his walls. But then Alexander Ashford, billionaire and businessman, walked into that playroom and sat down at the small table, his expensive clothes completely inappropriate for the activity, and said, "I'd love to paint with you, Sophia." And Elena, watching her daughter hand him a paintbrush with complete trust, watching this broken man smile, really smile, for the first time since she'd met him, felt something shift in her chest.
Hope, she realized.
For the first time since her husband's death, she felt hope. She didn't know that Alexander felt it too. Didn't know that as he helped Sophia paint a very wobbly rainbow, he was thinking that maybe, just maybe, he could learn to live again. Not to forget. He would never forget Caroline and Lily. But to honor them by protecting this new little girl who'd crawled into his study and somehow crawled straight into the heart he'd thought was dead. Outside the playroom, Mrs. Chin watched the scene with knowing eyes and a small smile. The Ashford mansion, she thought, was finally becoming a home again. 3 weeks after Sophia's unauthorized adventure into the study, the Ashford estate had transformed in ways both subtle and profound. The change was most evident in the man himself. Alexander still worked punishing hours, still commanded his business empire with an iron fist, but now his days had a different rhythm. At 3 o'clock each afternoon, he would emerge from his study and make his way to the West Wing playroom. He never announced himself, never made a fuss, but Sophia always seemed to sense his arrival. Mr. Alex became the soundtrack of those autumn afternoons, followed by the patter of small feet and a 3-year-old launching herself toward him with complete faith that he would catch her. He always did. Elena watched this ritual unfold with a mixture of wonder and concern. She was grateful, more than grateful, for everything Alexander had done for them. The job, the childcare, the security. But she worried about what would happen when he inevitably pulled away. Because men like Alexander Ashford didn't permanently attach themselves to their housekeeper's children. This was temporary kindness born of grief, and when he healed enough to move on with his life, where would that leave Sophia? Where would it leave her own heart, which had started doing dangerous things whenever she saw him smile at her daughter? "You're overthinking again," Miss Sarah said one afternoon, catching Elena staring through the playroom window where Alexander was helping Sophia build an elaborate castle out of blocks. "I just don't want her to get too attached," Elena murmured. "This can't last forever." Miss Sarah gave her a knowing look. "Can it? I've worked for the Ashford family for 15 years, dear. I was here when he married Caroline, here when Lily was born, and here when—" She paused delicately. "I've never seen him like this. Not even before. He's different with your Sophia. That's what worries me. What happens when he realizes he's using her to fill a hole that can't be filled? When the novelty wears off? And what if it doesn't?" Miss Sarah challenged gently. "What if this is real?" Before Elena could answer, a crash and a wail came from the playroom. Both women rushed in to find Sophia on the floor, the block castle scattered around her, tears streaming down her face. A small cut on her knee bled slightly, where she'd scraped it on a wooden block's edge. Alexander had frozen, his face drained of all color, staring at the blood with an expression of such raw horror that Elena's heart clenched. "It's okay, Mija, you're okay," Elena soothed, kneeling beside her daughter. But Sophia wasn't reaching for her. She was reaching for Alexander, her small arms outstretched, wanting comfort from him. Alexander didn't move. He seemed paralyzed, his breath coming fast and shallow, his hands trembling. "Mr. Ashford?" Miss Sarah said uncertainly. Elena understood immediately.
The blood.
The child's cry. It was triggering something, some memory of another child, another injury. "Sophia, come here, baby," Elena said firmly, scooping her daughter up. "Miss Sarah, could you get the first aid kit?" As Miss Sarah hurried off, Elena turned to Alexander. He was backing toward the door, his eyes still fixed on that small smear of blood on the floor. "I'm sorry," he said hoarsely. "I can't, I have to." "It's okay," Elena said softly. "We're okay."
"She's okay."
It's just a little scrape. But he was already gone, practically running from the room. Elena's heart ached as she comforted Sophia, cleaning the minor wound and applying a colorful bandage. She'd been right to worry. The wounds Alexander carried were too deep. Eventually, they would drive him away. That evening, after putting Sophia to bed, Elena found herself walking toward the third floor. She knew she shouldn't. Knew the rules. But something pulled her up those stairs, toward the study where light still shone under the door at 9 o'clock. She knocked softly. "Go away." His voice was rough, damaged. "It's Elena. May I come in?" A long pause. Then, "It's your job to fire." She opened the door to find him standing at the window with a glass of what looked like whiskey, his reflection ghost-like in the dark glass. "I'm not here as an employee," she said quietly, closing the door behind her. "I'm here as someone who understands grief." "You don't understand." He didn't turn around. "Your husband died. That's tragic. But you didn't cause his death. You didn't," his voice broke. "You didn't kill him." Elena's breath caught. "What?" "I was driving." The words came out flat, dead. "That night, I was driving Caroline and Lily to dinner. Some restaurant Caroline had been excited about. I'd been working, always working, and she'd begged me to take one night off. Just one night." He took a long drink. "I was on my phone. Some crisis at the Tokyo office. The light turned red, and I didn't see it until too late. I slammed the brakes, but he stopped, his shoulders shaking. The other driver ran the light too. Hit us on the passenger side, where they were sitting." "Oh, Alexander." Elena breathed. "Caroline died on impact. Lily." His voice cracked completely. "Lily lived for 3 hours. Long enough to be scared. Long enough to cry for me. Long enough to bleed while I held her and couldn't do anything to save her." Tears streamed down Elena's face. "It wasn't your fault. The other driver was drunk." "I know. Legally, it was his fault. But I was distracted. I should have seen the light change. If I'd been paying attention, I could have stopped sooner or swerved or..." He slammed his fist against the window frame. "I should have saved them." Elena crossed the room and did something she'd never dared before. She touched him, her hand gentle on his shoulder. He flinched but didn't pull away. "You can't save everyone," she said softly. "You couldn't save them. I couldn't save my husband. He died because his company cut corners on safety equipment to save money. Maybe if I'd insisted he find a different job, if I'd earned more so, he didn't have to take dangerous work, if I'd..." She stopped, forcing herself to say the next words. "I could drown in if only, but it wouldn't bring him back. And it wouldn't honor the time we had." Alexander finally turned to face her. His eyes were red-rimmed, devastated. "How do you bear it?" "The guilt. By getting up every day for Sophia. By letting her joy remind me that life still has meaning. By accepting that I'm human, and humans make mistakes, and sometimes terrible things happen that aren't anyone's fault even when our minds insist on finding someone to blame. When Sophia fell today, when I saw the blood..." He couldn't finish. "I know. You were back there in that moment." "I can't be what she needs," Alexander said desperately. "What if something happens to her because of me? What if I'm distracted, or I don't react fast enough, or... What if you are exactly what she needs?" Elena interrupted. "A man who cares so much that he's terrified of failing her? That's not a weakness, Alexander. That's love." He stared at her, something raw and vulnerable in his expression. "I signed those guardianship papers," he admitted. "A week ago. Had them filed with my attorney. I didn't tell you because I was afraid you'd think I was overstepping or trying to take her from you, or..." "I signed them too," Elena said quietly. "Yesterday." His eyes widened. "You did. Because I trust you. Because I see how you are with her. Because I believe that love makes us family, not blood." She paused, then added, "And because I think maybe we're saving each other. All three of us. Alexander set down his glass with a trembling hand. Elena, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to let myself care again without being terrified every moment that I'll lose everything. None of us know how, she said gently.
We just do it anyway.
We show up. We try. We let ourselves be human. I'm not good at being human. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I'm much better at being a corporation. Elena surprised herself by laughing softly. Well, you're going to have to learn. Because that little girl in the West Wing, she doesn't care about your portfolio or your business empire. She just wants Mr. Alex to show up and paint with her. She's remarkable, Alexander said, his voice full of wonder. She's so brave and joyful and everything good in the world. She likes you, Elena said. She asks about you every morning. Is Mr. Alex coming today? It's the first thing she says. Something shifted in Alexander's expression, longing mixed with fear mixed with hope. What if I let her down? You will, Elena said honestly. We all do. Parents aren't perfect, but we keep showing up anyway. That's what matters. They stood in the study, the night dark around them, two broken people holding pieces of each other's grief. Thank you, Alexander said finally, for coming up here, for understanding. Thank you for trusting me with your story. As Elena turned to leave, Alexander called out, Wait,
there's something I want to show you.
He crossed his desk and pulled out a leather photo album Elena had never seen before. He opened it carefully, reverently, to reveal a photograph of a beautiful woman with kind eyes and a little girl with blonde curls and a gap-toothed smile. Caroline and Lily, he said softly. 2 months before the accident. Elena looked at the photo, her heart aching for the family that had been lost. They were beautiful. Lily would have loved Sophia, Alexander said, touching his daughter's face in the photo with one finger. She loved everyone. Strangers, animals, kids at the park. Caroline used to say she was going to change the world with that big heart. I think she is, Elena said quietly. Through you. Every child you help through your foundation, every family you support, that's Lily's heart still changing the world. Alexander's eyes filled with tears. I never thought of it that way. Maybe it's time to start. That night marked a turning point. Alexander stopped running from the playroom when Sophia got minor bumps and scrapes. Instead, he learned to breathe through the panic, to stay present, to be there for this living child who needed him. And Sophia, with the wisdom of children everywhere, seemed to understand. She would climb into his lap when he looked sad, pat his cheek with her small hand and say, It's okay, Mr. Alex. Sophia here. Yes, Alexander would think, holding her close. You are. And somehow, that makes everything bearable. Elena watched them together and felt her heart expanding in ways that terrified her. She was falling for this broken billionaire who read bedtime stories in Spanish even though he didn't speak the language, who kept a drawer full of bandages with cartoon characters, who had started smiling again. This couldn't last, she told herself. This fairy tale couldn't be real. But then Alexander would look at her over Sophia's head, his eyes soft and grateful and full of something that looked dangerously like love, and Elena would think, what if it could? November arrived with cold rain and the kind of gray skies that made the mansion's warm, lit windows feel like a sanctuary. Sophia had been living at the estate for 2 months now, and the transformation in all their lives was undeniable. Alexander had stopped pretending his visits to the playroom were casual or brief. He now blocked off time in his schedule specifically for Sophia hours, and his assistant knew better than to book anything during those times. The business world had started to notice the change. Alexander Ashford was leaving meetings early, declining evening events, and actually taking weekends off. You've gone soft, his CFO, Marcus, teased during a video conference. Next thing we know, you'll be coaching soccer teams. Alexander had smiled, actually smiled, and said, Maybe I will. After Marcus's shocked face disappeared from the screen, Alexander sat back in his chair and realized it was true. He was different. Softer, yes, but also more present. More alive. For 5 years, he'd been a ghost haunting his own life. Now he was finally living again.
And it was terrifying.
Because the more he cared, the more he had to lose. And he'd already lost everything once. These fears crystallized one rainy November afternoon when Sophia spiked a fever. Elena found her listless and warm after nap time, and within an hour, her temperature had climbed to 103. "It's probably just a virus," Miss Sarah said calmly, having seen countless childhood fevers in her career. "But we should call her pediatrician to be safe." Elena nodded, trying to stay calm, but her hands shook as she dialed. She'd been through this before with Sophia, knew that fevers were common in toddlers, but after losing her husband so suddenly, every health concern felt like a potential catastrophe. Alexander appeared in the doorway as she was on the phone with the nurse helpline. He took one look at Sophia's flushed face and Elena's frightened expression and went pale. "What's wrong?" he demanded. "What happened?" "Fever," Elena said, her voice tight. "The nurse says to monitor it. Give her medicine, bring her to urgent care if it goes above 104, or if she seems unresponsive." "We should take her to the hospital now," Alexander said immediately. "We have the best pediatric hospital in the state 20 minutes from here. I'll call ahead. Make sure they're ready." "Alexander," the nurse said. "I don't care what the nurse said." His voice rose, panic clear in every word. "She's sick. She needs a doctor. We can't just wait and see if it gets worse." Sophia, disturbed by the loud voice, began to cry weakly. Elena pulled her daughter close, torn between comforting her child and calming Alexander, who looked like he was on the verge of a complete breakdown. "Mr. Ashford," Miss Sarah said firmly, "why don't you step outside for a moment?"
"No."
"I'm not leaving her." "What if—" He couldn't finish the sentence, but Elena knew what he was thinking. "What if she dies while I'm gone?" "Alexander, please," Elena said gently, even as her own heart raced with fear. "You're scaring her. Let me get her fever down, and if it doesn't come down in an hour, we'll take her in." "Okay." He wanted to argue. She could see it in every tense line of his body. But he also recognized that his panic was making things worse. He nodded jerkily and left the room, but Elena could hear him pacing in the hallway outside. For the next hour, Elena sponged Sophia down with lukewarm water, administered children's fever reducer, and sang soft Spanish lullabies while her daughter dozed fitfully. Miss Sarah brought ice pops and helped monitor Sophia's temperature, which gradually began to drop. Alexander checked in every 5 minutes until Miss Sarah finally banned him from the room. "You're going to give yourself a heart attack," she told him kindly but firmly. "Elena will come get you the moment anything changes. For now, you need to let her be a mother." By evening, Sophia's fever had dropped to 100.5, still elevated but no longer dangerous. She was awake, asking for crackers and her favorite cartoon, showing all the signs of a normal childhood virus running its course. Elena found Alexander in his study, standing at the window again, his default position when processing difficult emotions. He didn't turn when she entered. "She's better," Elena said softly. "Fever's down. She's eating." The pediatrician called back and said it sounds like a standard virus. Should clear up in a few days. His shoulders sagged with relief, but he still didn't turn around. "I couldn't breathe," he said quietly. "All afternoon, I felt like I was suffocating. Like I was back in that hospital waiting room, being told there was nothing they could do." Elena crossed the room and stood beside him, looking out at the rain-soaked gardens. "I know. I felt it too. Every time Sophia gets sick, I remember the call about Jorge. How suddenly everything changed." "How do you do it?" Alexander turned to her, his eyes desperate. How do you live with the fear? How do you love someone when you know how easily you could lose them?" "Because the alternative is worse," Elena said simply. "Living without love, Without connection, that's not living at all.
You know that.
You've spent 5 years trying it. At least I was safe. At least I couldn't be destroyed again. Were you safe? Or were you already destroyed, just in a different way? Alexander flinched at the truth of her words. I don't know if I'm strong enough for this, Elena. Today proved it. One fever, and I fell apart. You didn't fall apart. You were scared. That's different. That's human. She touched his arm gently. And you let Miss Sarah help. You let me handle it. That takes strength too. I wanted to take her to the hospital myself. Make sure she had the best care, the best doctors. I know. But sometimes the best care is a mother's touch and children's Tylenol and patience. Not everything requires extreme measures. Not everything required extreme measures for Lily either, Alexander said bitterly. Until suddenly it did. Elena's heart ached for him. You can't live your life preparing for worst-case scenarios. You'll miss all the joy in the middle. What if the joy isn't worth the pain? Is it? Elena challenged. Has the last 2 months with Sophia brought you pain? Or has it brought you back to life? Alexander was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he said, both. It's brought me both. That's what love is, Elena said softly. It's both. It's the risk and the reward all tangled together. And yes, someday we'll lose each other. That's the human condition. But until then, we get to have this. We get to have Sophia's laugh and her terrible drawings and her calling your name when you come home. We get to have life, Alexander. Real, messy, terrifying, beautiful life. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and Elena saw the moment something shifted in his eyes. When did you become so wise? When I had to choose between drowning in grief or swimming toward something better. I chose to swim. For Sophia. And now. She hesitated, then plunged forward. Now I'm choosing to swim toward this. Whatever this is between all of us. Elena. Her name on his lips was a question and an answer all at once. I know it's complicated, she said quickly. I know I work for you, and there's a power imbalance, and maybe I'm reading everything wrong, but... He kissed her. It was gentle and desperate all at once, his hand cupping her face like she was something precious and breakable. Elena's breath caught, her heart hammering, every nerve ending alive. When he pulled back, his eyes were searching hers. Tell me I'm not alone in this, he said roughly. Tell me you feel it too. I feel it, Elena whispered. God help me. I feel everything. I never thought I'd want this again. Want someone again. His thumb traced her cheekbone. But then you walked into my life with your strength and your courage and your incredible daughter, and suddenly I was feeling things I'd locked away. Wanting things I thought I'd never want again. I'm scared too, Elena admitted. I'm scared of what happens when you realize I'm just the maid with nothing to offer, but... Don't. His voice was fierce. Don't reduce yourself like that. You're not just anything. You're extraordinary. You've survived loss and rebuilt your life and raised an amazing child while dealing with grief and poverty, and he stopped overwhelmed. You're the strongest person I've ever met. Tears spilled down Elena's cheeks. I don't feel strong. I feel terrified. Of this. Of you. Of losing everything again. Then we'll be terrified together. He pulled her close, and Elena let herself lean against him. Let herself be held by this man who was just as broken and brave as she was. They stood like that for a long time, finding comfort in each other's arms, until a small voice from the doorway said, Mr. Alex? Why, Mama crying? They sprang apart to find Sophia standing in the doorway in her pajamas, her stuffed doll clutched in one hand, looking worried. Happy tears, Mija, Elena said, quickly wiping her eyes. Mama's okay. Sophia studied them both with the uncanny perception of children. Then she walked over and wrapped her small arms around both their legs in a group hug.
Don't be sad.
Sophia loves you. Alexander looked down at this little girl who had somehow healed him, who had brought him back from the dead, and felt something break open in his chest. Not the painful breaking of grief, but the necessary breaking of walls that had stood too long. He picked her up, and she immediately curled against his shoulder with perfect trust. "I love you too, Pequeña," he said softly, the Spanish word Elena had taught him. "So much." Elena watched them together, her daughter and this man who had become so much more than an employer, and felt hope bloom fully in her chest. Maybe this could work. Maybe they could be a family. Maybe love was worth the risk after all. Later that night, after Sophia was asleep and Elena had returned to her quarters, Alexander sat in his study with that leather photo album open on his desk. "I met someone," he told Caroline's picture softly, "and I'm falling in love with her daughter. With her. I never thought I'd feel this way again."
Tears blurred his vision.
"I hope that's okay. I hope you understand. I'll never forget you and Lily. Never. But I think I'm finally ready to live again. To let myself be happy again." The photo couldn't answer, but Alexander imagined he could hear Caroline's voice, warm and kind. "I want you to be happy. We'll always be part of you, but that doesn't mean you can't love again. That little girl needs you. And I think you need her too." "I do," Alexander whispered. "I really do." For the first time in 5 years, he closed the album without feeling like he was abandoning them. Instead, he felt like he was honoring them by choosing life, by choosing love, by becoming the man they'd believed he could be. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing the world clean, making space for new growth. And in the West Wing, Sophia slept peacefully, dreaming of painting rainbows and building castles, and the tall man with sad eyes who was finally learning to smile. December brought the first snow, and with it, a question that would change everything. "What does Sophia want for Christmas?" Alexander asked one evening as they decorated the mansion's main hall. He was on a ladder, hanging garland under Elena's direction, while Sophia helped by enthusiastically draping tinsel over everything in reach. Elena paused, a string of lights in her hands. "She doesn't expect much. Maybe a few small toys, some books in Spanish." "That's not what I asked." Alexander climbed down and stood close enough that she could smell his cologne, cedar, and something crisp. "What does she want? What does she dream about?" Elena thought of the conversations she'd had with Sophia, the games they played. "She wants a big Christmas tree in our room. She talks about the one we had in our old apartment. Jorge always went overboard, buying the biggest tree he could find. And she wants to make cookies like we used to, the ones with colored sugar. And..." Elena hesitated. "And..." She asked if you could read her the Christmas story on Christmas Eve. The one about baby Jesus. "It's tradition in my family, but I didn't want to presume." "Yes," Alexander said immediately. "I'd be honored." Over the next weeks, the mansion transformed into a winter wonderland that was somehow both elegant and warm. Alexander threw himself into Christmas preparations with an intensity that might have been concerning if it wasn't so endearing. He arranged for a 12-foot tree to be placed in Elena and Sophia's quarters. Never mind that it barely fit. He ordered cookie-making supplies in bulk. He hired a children's choir to perform carols in the Great Hall. He bought presents, lots of them, carefully chosen and beautifully wrapped. "You're going overboard," Elena warned him one evening as another delivery truck arrived. "Probably," he agreed, not sounding remotely apologetic. "But I haven't celebrated Christmas in 5 years. Let me be ridiculous." How could she argue with that? Mrs. Chen pulled Elena aside one afternoon, her expression serious. "I need to tell you something. About Mr. Ashford." Elena's stomach clenched. "Okay." After the accident, he locked up the family wing. Lily's nursery, the master bedroom he'd shared with Caroline, everything. Hasn't been in there once in 5 years. Mrs. Chen's eyes were kind. "Yesterday, I saw him go in. He was in there for 2 hours. When he came out, his eyes were red, but he looked lighter somehow. Elena's heart ached. What was he doing? Saying goodbye, I think. Making peace. Mrs. Chen touched Elena's arm gently. He's letting himself move forward. Because of you and your daughter.
I wanted you to know that.
In case you're still worried this is temporary. That evening, Alexander found Elena in the estate office, supposedly working on foundation files, but actually staring into space. Penny for your thoughts? He asked, leaning against the doorframe. Mrs. Chen told me you opened the family wing. Alexander's expression sobered. He came into the office, closing the door behind him. I did. I finally felt ready to face it. How was it? Painful, but good in a way. He sat across from her. I packed up Lily's room. I've been holding on to everything like a shrine, like if I kept it all exactly the same, somehow she'd come back. But that's not honoring her memory. That's just hiding from grief. What will you do with her things? Donate most of them. Kids who need clothes and toys more than I need ghosts.
He paused.
But I kept some special things. Her favorite book, the blanket Caroline's mother made. Some photos. The things that matter. Elena reached across the desk and took his hand. I'm proud of you. That couldn't have been easy. It wasn't, but I had motivation. His gray eyes were intense on hers. I want to move forward, Elena. Really forward. With you. With Sophia. If you'll have me. Alexander. I know there are complications. The fact that you work for me, for one.
I've already spoken to my attorneys about that.
I can transfer your employment to the foundation as an independent contractor, so technically I won't be your boss anymore. Or you could quit entirely. You'd have full financial support either way. I don't want financial support like I'm some kind of kept woman, Elena said, stung. That's not what I meant. He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. I'm handling this badly. I'm trying to say that I want to be with you.
Properly.
Not as employer and employee, but as equals. As partners. Elena's heart raced. You're talking about a relationship. I'm talking about everything, Alexander said intensely. I'm talking about you and Sophia moving into the family wing. I'm talking about being a real family. I'm talking about, he stopped, seemed to gather his courage. I'm talking about marriage. Eventually. When you're ready. If you're ready. Elena felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. Marriage? Alexander, we haven't even been on a date. We've kissed once. You can't possibly. I'm 33 years old. I've been married before. I know what I want. He stood, began pacing. I know this is fast. I know it's crazy. But I've wasted 5 years being dead inside, and I don't want to waste any more time. I love you, Elena. I love your daughter. I want to spend my life making you both happy, if you'll let me. Tears spilled down Elena's cheeks. I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it. Say you'll give us a chance. He knelt beside her chair, taking both her hands in his. I know I'm broken. I know I have issues to work through. But I swear I will spend every day trying to be the man you and Sophia deserve. You already are, Elena whispered. You're already everything we need. Is that a yes? It's a let's take this one step at a time. It's a yes, I want to be with you, but let's do this right. It's a, she cupped his face in her hands. It's an I love you too, you ridiculous man. Alexander's smile was brilliant, transforming his entire face. He pulled her down to him, kissing her deeply, pouring 5 years of locked-away emotion into that kiss. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Alexander said, one step at a time.
I can do that.
Starting with Christmas. Let me give you and Sophia the Christmas you deserve. Christmas morning dawned cold and bright. Elena woke to find Sophia already up, pressing her face against the window to watch the snow falling in fat, lazy flakes. Mama, Mr. Alex says come downstairs. In the great hall, Elena stopped in her tracks. The massive Christmas tree was lit with what must have been 1,000 lights, presents piled beneath it in colorful stacks. But that wasn't what made her gasp. Standing beside the tree was Alexander, holding a tiny white and brown puppy with a red bow around its neck. "You didn't," Elena breathed. "Her name is Neve, Spanish for snow," Alexander said, bringing the puppy over. "And before you protest, she's technically mine, but I'm willing to share custody." Sophia's shriek of joy could probably be heard in the next county. She buried her face in the puppy's soft fur, laughing and crying at once. "Mama, Mama, a puppy. Our puppy." Elena looked at Alexander over her daughter's head, this man who had somehow become her everything, and mouthed, "I love you." He mouthed it back. They spent the day in joy, opening presents, too many, but Alexander was unapologetic. Making cookies, Sophia decorated them with enough sugar to give everyone diabetes, and playing with Neve, who promptly peed on an antique rug, much to Alexander's amusement. That evening, as promised, Alexander read the Christmas story to Sophia in Spanish, phonetically sounding out words Elena had written out for him. His pronunciation was terrible, but his heart was in every word. After Sophia fell asleep, Elena and Alexander sat by the tree, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. "Thank you," she said softly, "for giving her this day, for giving us this life." "Thank you for saving mine," he replied, kissing her temple. "I was drowning, and you threw me a lifeline without even knowing it. We saved each other." "We did." He pulled out a small box from his pocket. "I know I said one step at a time. I know we agreed to take things slow, but I wanted you to have this." Elena opened the box to find a delicate necklace with 3 small pendants, a heart, a star, and a key. "The heart is for love," Alexander explained. "The star is for hope, what you brought back into my life. And the key is because you and Sophia unlocked my heart when I thought it was sealed forever." Elena couldn't speak through her tears. She just turned and kissed him, putting everything she felt into that kiss. "Merry Christmas, mi amor," she whispered. "Merry Christmas," he replied. "The first of many." Upstairs, Sophia slept with Neve curled at her feet, dreaming of snow and cookies and the family she'd somehow created by crawling into a billionaire's study. And in heaven, if such a place existed, perhaps Caroline and Lily smiled down at them, grateful that their beloved Alexander had found his way back to joy. 6 months later, on a perfect June afternoon, Elena stood in the mansion's rose garden, wearing a simple white dress that made her feel like a princess. Sophia was beside her in a miniature version, holding Neve's leash with one hand and a basket of rose petals with the other. "Ready, Mija?" Elena asked. "Ready, Mama." Sophia's English had improved remarkably, though she still preferred Spanish at home. "Mr. Alex waiting." They decided on a small ceremony, just Mrs. Chen, Miss Sarah, a few of Alexander's close friends who'd returned to his life after years of exile, and Elena's mother who'd flown in from Mexico with tears of joy streaming down her face. As Elena walked down the makeshift aisle between the roses, she saw Alexander waiting under an arch of white flowers, and her breath caught. He wore a dark suit, but his eyes were soft, vulnerable, full of love. When she reached him, he took her hands and whispered, "You're so beautiful." "You're not so bad yourself," she teased, then added more seriously. "Are you sure about this? It's not too late to change your mind." "I've never been more sure of anything," he said firmly. "You and Sophia are my future, my forever." The ceremony was short but perfect. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Alexander kissed her deeply while Sophia cheered and Neve barked excitedly. At the reception dinner, Alexander stood to make a toast, his voice thick with emotion. 5 years ago, I thought my life was over. I'd lost everything that mattered, and I couldn't see a reason to keep going. I was alive, but I wasn't living." He looked at Elena, then at Sophia, who was sitting between them. "Then a curious little girl crawled into my study one day, looking for a shiny letter opener and completely unafraid of the grumpy man who lived on the third floor. Laughter rippled through the small gathering. She saw past the walls I'd built. She demanded I paint with her and read her stories and be present in a way I hadn't been present in years. And her mother, his voice broke slightly. Her mother showed me that it was okay to live again, to love again, that grief and joy could coexist, that I could honor my past while building a future. He raised his glass. To Elena, who taught me to swim instead of drown, and to Sophia, who reminded me what it means to hope. You've given me back my life, and I promise to spend every day of it making you both as happy as you've made me. Elena was crying, and she wasn't alone. Even Mrs. Chun was dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. Mi amor, Elena said, standing and taking Alexander's hand. You saved us too. You gave us a home when we had nothing. You gave us safety and security and love, so much love. You're not just my husband. You're Sophia's father in every way that matters. And I promise to stand beside you through everything, the joy and the sorrow, the easy days and the hard ones. Forever. Forever, Alexander echoed, pulling her close. Forever. Sophia added, climbing onto her chair to wrap her arms around both their necks in her signature group hug. We family forever. Later that evening, after the guests had left and Sophia was finally asleep in her new bedroom in the family wing, bigger than their entire old apartment, with walls painted the color of sunshine, Elena and Alexander stood in the nursery next door. It had been Lily's room once. Now it had been repainted in soft greens and yellows, ready for the baby that would arrive in 5 months. Elena placed a hand on her barely there bump, still marveling at this unexpected blessing. Are you happy? Alexander asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind, his hand covering hers on her stomach. Deliriously, she said. Are you? More than I ever thought possible. He kissed her neck softly. I used to think happiness was something you achieved, like a goal you could reach through hard work and planning. But you've taught me it's something you choose. Every day. In small moments. Like a little girl demanding pancakes at 6 in the morning? Elena teased. Exactly like that. He turned her to face him. I love you, Mrs. Ashford. I love you too. She kissed him slowly, sweetly. Thank you for not giving up. On yourself. On life. On us. Thank you for crawling into my life and refusing to leave, he replied, smiling. Best trespassing incident ever. They laughed together, holding each other in the room where new life would soon arrive, surrounded by the quiet peace of a house that had finally become a home. Down the hall, Sophia stirred in her sleep and smiled, dreaming of her mama and her papa. She'd started calling Alexander that last month, and he'd cried, and the baby brother or sister who was coming. Neve was curled at the foot of her bed, equally content. And somewhere in the cosmos, if love truly transcended death, perhaps two souls looked down at the family that had formed from broken pieces and felt peace. Caroline and Jorge, both gone but not forgotten, had given life to the people now building something beautiful together. Love hadn't erased the grief. The scars remained, the phantom pain of loss, the moments when Alexander still panicked over small injuries, the nights when Elena woke from nightmares of being alone again. But they'd learned to carry their grief together, to let it coexist with joy. Because that's what life was, not the absence of pain, but the choice to find beauty despite it. Not the forgetting of those we've lost, but the honoring of them by living fully. Not the avoidance of risk, but the brave decision to love again, knowing it could break us, choosing it anyway. 3 years later, Elena sat in the rose garden watching Alexander chase 5-year-old Sophia and 2-year-old Gabriel across the lawn, Neve barking joyfully at their heels. Her husband's laughter rang out clear and bright, all traces of the broken man she'd first met erased by years of healing. Sophia caught her looking and ran over, breathless and happy. Mama, Papa says we're going to the beach next week. All of us. I heard, Elena said, pulling her daughter close. It'll be fun. I'm gonna build the biggest sandcastle ever, Sophia announced. Even bigger than the one we made last time. I'm sure you will, my love. Sophia paused, studying her mother with those wise eyes that saw more than most children's. Mama, are you happy here? In the big house. Elena thought about the question seriously. I'm happy wherever we are together. The house is beautiful, but it's not what makes me happy. You and Papa and Gabriel, you're what makes me happy. You're my home. Sophia nodded, satisfied. Then she said something that made Elena's heart squeeze. Miss Sarah says you and Papa were sad before. Before we found each other. Is that true? Yes, Mija. We were both very sad. We'd both lost people we loved very much. But you're not sad now. Sometimes I'm still sad, Elena admitted. I miss your first Papa, the one who loved you before you were even born. And Papa sometimes misses his first family. But we're also happy. We can be both. Sophia considered this. Like how you can be hungry and full at the same time when you eat too much cake. Elena laughed, pulling her close. Something like that, yes. I'm glad we found Papa, Sophia said seriously. I think he needed us. I think we needed him too. And now we're a forever family. Right, Mama? Right, my Sophia. Forever and always. Sophia beamed and ran back to Alexander, who scooped her up and spun her around, his face alight with pure joy. He caught Elena's eye and smiled, that smile that still made her heart race, that promised everything and delivered more. She smiled back, her hand resting on her stomach where a third child grew, another miracle they'd created together. The poor maid's baby had crawled into a billionaire's study one ordinary Tuesday morning, looking for something shiny to play with. What she'd found instead was a broken man who needed saving just as much as she and her mother did. And in saving each other, they'd built something neither had dared to dream of, a family forged not from perfection, but from love. Not from forgetting the past, but from honoring it while embracing the future. Not from fairy tales, but from the beautiful, messy, complicated reality of choosing each other every single day. That was the real magic. Not wealth or rescue or dramatic transformation. Just the quiet, steady magic of showing up, of trying, of loving despite fear, of building a life together, one small moment at a time. As the sun set over the Ashford estate, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, Elena watched her family play and thought, This is everything I never knew I needed. And in that moment, surrounded by laughter and love, the ghost of grief finally loosened its grip completely, making room for something better.
Hope. Joy.
Forever.
The end.
Sometimes the greatest treasures come in the smallest packages. Sometimes the broken pieces fit together better than anyone could have imagined. And sometimes, love finds us in the most unexpected places, even in a billionaire's study, behind a door marked forbidden, in the curious eyes of a 3-year-old who refused to believe in barriers. This is the story of 3 hearts that found each other in the darkness and chose to build a light together. Not a perfect light, but a real one. Not a fairy tale ending, but something better, a new beginning. May we all have the courage to crawl through forbidden doors, to take the hands offered to us, and to believe that even after devastating loss, love can find us again.